Hey guys, welcome back from break. I hope you enjoyed your week. I know there wasn't as much to do, but hopefully you got some downtime. Hopefully you got some time to rest and finish things. This week we're going to do genetic engineering. There's an activity to do. There's some review to do, and then we're going to do an assessment on Canvas at the end of the week. So just so you know, that's what's coming up. That's what we're doing for this last unit. So genetic engineering, there's a lot of different parts of it, or a lot of different ways it could happen. It can actually happen naturally with selective breeding. So this can be where people choose the best traits, what they think. The reason it's in quotes here is different traits could be best for different animals or different things that people choose. It could be the best trait, like the fastest racehorse. It could be the purebred dog. It could be, I'm just thinking, the genetics that you want for whatever the animal is that you're looking for. A lot of domestic animals, so a lot of dogs, house cats, things like that, were selectively bred at some point. So this would probably be, the dog breeder choosing which dogs to breed. Okay, if you breed two nice dogs, you'll generally get nice dogs, and eventually getting the most tame dogs. So, this happens naturally in that the animals are still actually breeding and they're still giving birth to puppies. There's not a major scientific involvement here. So different animals here, different horses, bred for different things. Maybe their pattern, maybe the muscle structure, maybe the amount of hair they have based on where they live, how fast they are. Any of that stuff is selective breeding. Cows, sheep, pigs, like it says in here, all of these are selected. Sheep, you would want a sheep with more wool if that's what you're raising them for. Cows, and pigs, they could be bred for the meat. Cows bred for the ones that give the most milk. So all kinds of different traits that farmers might want to have. So hybridization, I think earlier in the notes we talked about hybrids, how it's mixed from both parents, like the short pea plants and the tall pea plants. In this here, the dissimilar individuals to bring together the best traits makes a hybrid. So it can be different species crossed together. So we could have different species, horse times a donkey equals mule, or different types within the same species. So here we're talking different breeds of dogs. I'm thinking, sorry, I'm blanking out on dog breeds, but they're all dogs still. We're just breeding different breeds with each other. So here are the golden doodle, the puggle. So people breeding dogs to get the traits they want, getting, really cute dogs or really friendly dogs or dogs that are really good at herding or whatever the case could be. Here we go. The pug, what is that, a Rottweiler, I think. And then we get whatever that new breed is called. So, yay, new dog. Not to be confused with hybrid cars, had to throw that in there. But it is a good way to think of it because hybrid cars are gas and electric. So they're not just gas, not just electric. They're kind of the best of both. So inbreeding, this could be a problem with selective breeding. If you're breeding constantly very, very similar organisms, similar breeds, example, purebred dogs, it can lead to issues because there aren't new genes coming in. There aren't new mutations coming in. So a lot of dog breeds are predisposed to different health issues. Like I have here golden retrievers, epilepsy. Dalmatians could be deaf. My sister has a Rottweiler, a purebred Rottweiler, my sister-in-law, and it's predisposed to hip issues. So I think it's had its hips replaced twice. And that's just something Rottweilers deal with. So continual breeding of similar individuals. This could happen in people. We have examples of, I think it's, the Russian ruling family years ago. Since there was so much inbreeding within the royal family, and even European families, royal families hundreds of years ago, they didn't have a lot of genetic diversity. So things like hemophilia were very common because they didn't have mutations to mask that. We also see this amongst the group of people back in the Midwest, the Amish people, who they have a group of people and they often marry within that group of people. So sometimes if there's health issues, they don't have other new genes, mutations coming in to mask them. So they've made their choices. I totally respect them for their religious beliefs, but genetically, sometimes that can lead to issues. For example, too, all white tigers are inbred because the white fur is a recessive trait. So if you breed them with another tiger, orange tiger, you're not going to have the white fur anymore. So all white tigers are inbred, and as you can see here, this tiger has some issues, some physical deformities, the inbreeding here. So breeders will often increase this variation. They'll bring in new types of animals, in this case cats. So they'll either bring in like a totally different animal, or not animal, but a different cat. If a cat has a mutation, like in this case the flat ears, that happened randomly, but now they'll start breeding with those. Sorry, someone's sneezing in the background. I'm not sure if it's Zeke or Kai, but someone's sneezing. But then once those mutations happen, breeders might say, hey, I like that, or I don't like that, and they might change their breeding strategy to either get more of those traits or to get fewer of those traits. Some mutations can produce new kinds of bacteria. So something that's cool, something super helpful, oil-eating bacteria. If there's a bacteria that eats oil and we can release that after an oil spill, that's way more helpful and useful than having to do a whole bunch of resources and things like that to try to get rid of the oil spill itself. This is a much more natural way to do it. And then once the oil's gone, the bacteria would die, and it's more natural. We're doing the environment a favor here. A lot of different kinds of plants are from mutations. Daylilies, bananas, citrus fruits. Polyploid, so poly meaning many, ploid meaning sets of chromosomes. I'm not as well versed on my plants and how that all goes, but I know that if they have more sets of chromosomes, if they have mutations, it can lead to different things, different variations. You know, you'll find different types of citrus fruit in the grocery store, or different types of fruit in general. Tangelos, those are two different types of fruits crossed with each other. You'll see the ones where, what is it, like a grapple, a grape flavor in an apple. Different crosses like that. Next time you go to the grocery store, especially like a specialty store, look at the fruits there, and you can see how people have crossed different things and to get the different fruits. Plants are a lot easier to do that with too, because you can just cross-pollinate, and it'll also grow relatively quickly. We're not talking about like a dog getting pregnant and then having to wait months for the puppies to be born and then waiting years for those puppies to be old enough. Plants are much quicker and, easier as far as that goes. So, different techniques for genetic engineering, but a common goal. Basically, this is the steps, crash course in genetic engineering, that the scientists would do. So now we're into the science part of things, not the selective breeding anymore. Extract the DNA from cells. They take teeny tiny needles and they extract the DNA. They take enzymes or chemicals to cut the DNA into smaller pieces. They don't need the entire DNA strands. They just take the pieces they want. They look at the sequence of bases of this molecule. They look at what they've got in a row. Then they go through that and they make a whole bunch of copies of this. Once they have a whole bunch of copies of this, they can use this. They can insert this into other living things' DNA, into other living things' genomes. So this is, once again, super quick, super simplified, but a lot what genetic engineers do. All right, transgenic. Now this, you could spend so much time just discussing these and the ethics behind this, or the uses behind this, or why scientists would want to do this. So there's some pretty crazy examples. Some are useful, some are weird, some are totally non-useful. So transgenic, they contain genes from other species. So in this case, you could have bacteria, animals, plants. There's an example of a tomato years ago. So they took the tomato plant and they inserted genes from a fish into it. The fish lived in an Arctic region, and scientists noticed, like, hey, this fish lives in freezing water, but it doesn't freeze. What's different about this? They took that gene from the fish, the not freezing gene, inserted that into a tomato plant. That did not make the tomato smell or taste fishy. It did not make the tomato look like a fish or flop around in water or anything, but it did help the tomatoes not to freeze when they were being shipped from one area to another. So it did not turn the tomato plant into a fish, but it did help the tomato have a much longer shelf life and to be brought to areas that wouldn't otherwise necessarily get tomatoes. So a lot of times plants are genetically engineered just because it helps the distribution of them. So this is one, I'm not really sure what the use of this would be, but a gene that helps jellyfish glow in the dark, the bioluminescence, inserted into mice, and now these mice glow in the dark. Other than having this as a nightlight, I'm not really sure what the use is, but it's been done. This one, I realize it's kind of shocking, but here we have a mouse or a rat, I think it's a rat, with a human ear growing on its back. Okay, this way a human could get a new ear. Maybe they lost an ear in an accident or they were born without one, and they could get a new one without someone else having to donate it. So it doesn't hurt the rat, I mean, except for the fact that it's growing an ear on its back and might have to be surgically removed later. But the rat's still living out its normal rat life, but it's growing these parts on it to be used in humans. So transgenic, it has human genes in a rat. Another glowing mouse, it looks like. So once again, kind of useless, but really, really cool. So cloning. Genetic engineering often leads to discussions about cloning. Oftentimes when we think of cloning, we think of, wow, identical twins or some kind of like creepy movie or something. But basically clones are just a member of genetically identical cells, member of a population, genetically identical cells produced from a single cell. Now, single-celled organisms, bacteria, are relatively easy to clone. You take the DNA from one, you copy it, you put it into a different one. There, straightforward. Multicellular organisms are much more difficult. And even going through this, like you can learn the science of it, but it still takes many, many, many tries to actually do it. Much money to clone things. I know there's organizations that clone pets. You know, you have a dog that you really love, or maybe a service dog, or maybe an award-winning racehorse you want cloned. People have cloned animals, but there's still issues, and it doesn't always just automatically work. Something kind of cool, identical twins. So I'm going to add here an identical twin is a natural clone. Now, fraternal twins are not natural clones. They're not identical. Identical clones, well, fraternal clones, there's 2 eggs, 2 sperm. The eggs get fertilized and develop at the same time. Identical twins, 1 egg, 1 sperm. The egg gets fertilized by the sperm. For some reason in the development, it splits apart into 2 embryos. So that's why they're identical, because they have the same genes. 1 egg, 1 sperm. So the same sets of DNA. So just kind of cool with twins. So twins, especially, like boy-girl twins, they're not identical. They don't have the same DNA. So here's, identical twins. They look alike. I'm sure you guys all know identical twins. Now, this is where kind of some ethics come in. Years ago, I remember, I think I was, middle school or high school, they cloned the first sheep. They cloned the first sheep. Dolly was her name, and they made a little mini Dolly. Well, is this what's going to lead to a whole bunch of clones of people? Well, cloning's kind of interesting in that there's a lot of different hang-ups. So if I were to clone myself, say I were to make my clone next week. Well, I'm in my 30s. My clone would take at least 9 months to develop and then be born. My clone and I would be 30-some years apart. So it's not just like an automatic identical copy of yourself. Also, my clone would not be born with my memories. So I grew up in Michigan. I grew up on a farm. I have a whole set of memories with my siblings, my parents. If I had my clone out here, raised it as a baby through an adult, it would be growing up in the city in California. It would have different siblings, different parents. It would have a whole different set of memories. So just because something's genetically identical does not mean it's going to be you as you are now. Like, you can't just like send that clone to school or work for you and oh, no one will tell the difference. Like, there's a major age difference, there's major memory differences, how it's raised. There's also the ethical dilemmas that are raised all up and down the spectrum. Should we, shouldn't we do that? So, how to clone a sheep. This makes it super, super, super duper simple, but bear with me here. So, sheep A. Scientists take a body cell. They would just extract it with a needle or something. They take the DNA out of that cell. Meanwhile, from sheep B, which would be a female, I'm not sure if that says it on the bottom or not, they take the egg cell. So this is an unfertilized egg cell from a female sheep. They take everything out of it. So that's gone. They take the DNA that they extracted, they put that into that egg cell. So now that egg cell doesn't have to have a sperm fertilize it. It now has a full set of DNA. They take this one, now that they have the egg cell with the full set of DNA, I think part of this got cut off here, sorry, and they implant that into another female. I'm not sure if it can be the same female as the first one or not, but they implant that into a surrogate mother. It starts developing, starts growing, eventually it's born, it's a sheep, and it will be a clone exactly the same genetically as sheep A. So it's super simplified, taking away all of the variables here of the time it would take, the money it would take, how many tries it would take, how viable it would be. This is like cloning 101. This is how they would do it. So once again, cloning, super, super simplified. A human, she donates an egg. So this egg, they take the nucleus out of it. It goes down here. They took this from the donor cell. All right, they put that DNA in there. It gets transplanted into a surrogate. It grows. Eventually, you would have a human clone. Super simplified, super basic, and ignoring all of the ethical dilemmas that would go with this. So I'm not saying this is good. I'm not saying this is bad. I'm just saying if scientists were to do it, this is how they would do it. And eventually, you'd have a clone of this gentleman here. Let's see here. It's another thing. This is more with animals. Remember with the monster genetics, there were some regulatory genes. That's how it is with cats. So even this one here, Rainbow, let's see here, CC, carbon copy, is a clone of that cat. But even then, genetically, it might be the same. However, with these genes being randomly turned on and off, the regulatory genes, this cat looks different. So genetically, it's a clone. It's exactly the same. But there's no guarantee that everything will look the same. Everything will get triggered the same in development. You know, that these random color cells that are turned off and on will make the same color patterns. Some ways that they're useful. Now, cloning, once again, I said it's not good, it's not bad. There's a lot of issues to think about with it. But more with like plants and animals, we can think of it as more of a black and white area. You can save endangered species. If you can somehow store the DNA of all of the endangered animals, put them into like a donor organism to develop and grow, you know, you can save an endangered species, maybe even an extinct species. This is the whole like Jurassic Park, extract the DNA and make dinosaurs thing. So that's kind of an extreme example, but it could be used to save things that are in danger of going extinct. Make multiple copies of a useful gene. Insulin for diabetes. They need insulin. This is a really good use of genetic engineering. So if you can make lots and lots of copies of it, give diabetics this insulin so that they can survive and thrive, that's a good use. Spare parts. So instead of having to wait for a donor to donate a heart, kidneys, lungs, whatever, the ear that was in the earlier slide, if you could grow them on the back of a mouse or a rat, or if you could grow someone a heart in a laboratory that would be a perfect genetic match, that would be awesome. People wouldn't have to wait for things. They wouldn't have to wait for the bone marrow donor. So that would be huge in the field of medicine. Experimental groups. This one kind of gets in the gray areas of what's ethically a good choice. Make a group of organisms that has a certain trait. Try out different medications on them or different treatments on them. Have a type of plant that has a certain trait. See if it's immune to a pesticide. Cool, if it's immune, then we can plant that kind of plant, spray the whole field with the pesticide. It'll kill off the bugs, but it won't hurt the plant. Or a weed killer. Spray the whole field with the weed killer. It won't kill the plants, but it'll kill the weeds. So that could be useful. Create clone special animals, pets or horses. I kind of mentioned that earlier. It's a racehorse here. Once again, it got cut off a little bit, but if you have an award-winning racehorse, you want to keep breeding award-winning fast racehorses, you might want to clone one. You have a guide dog or a support animal or something. It's starting to get sick. You don't want to lose it. Maybe clone it, and then you would have another one of the same dog. All right, so, there are people that have done this. This one here isn't, I don't want to say it's super unusual, but you hear about it in the news every so often. It's really expensive, but people do that for now. But lots of interesting stuff with this. I wish I could be there to answer your questions. I wish I could be there to show you more examples. Keep in mind, though, there's science to it, but there's also moral issues with this. So it's not necessarily super clear cut what we should or shouldn't do. There can be good, there can be bad. But let me know if you have any questions. Plan on the quiz or some kind of exercise assessment on Canvas later in the week. And it's good to talk to you guys all again. Have a great day. All right, well, we're not